and welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. I'm your host. As usual, my name is Maryanne Dersch. I work with nonprofit leaders to grow their influence so they can ask for and receive all they want, need, and deserve without feeling rejected or pushy, because who wants to feel that? All right, it's me today. This is me. I'm flying solo, and I want to share with you a concept, some content that I've been mulling over and working on and researching for a while. And I do this influence course. By the way, if you want to grow your influence, just let me know. And when you complete my course, I have a back-end program where people who really want to keep working on their leadership and communication skills. And I delivered this content to my back-end program and I loved it. And so now I want to share it with you. So let's get started. Now, I'm going to talk about the different generations and how our nonprofits interact and react to them and kind of what's shifting and what's coming, because I think this is really, really important. Now, I am a Gen Xer, so I am in between everything and everyone, and that's part of our identity. But I feel like I almost have a 5-generation wingspan right now, where going from what we call the greatest generation, or quote unquote, the matures, people older than boomers, to the boomers, to the Gen X, to the millennials, to the Gen Zs, this group of people, like, I feel like I'm above it all and I can kind of see the landscape. And this topic was inspired in me by watching TikToks about millennial age kids who had either no contact or low contact with their boomer parents, complaining that their boomer parents didn't understand their feelings, didn't understand how to connect and communicate with them. And then I also saw videos of parents, the boomer age Gen X parents, saying, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know what's happening. I did my best by my kids. I can't see the gap. That is so apparent to them. And I started thinking about that and thinking about how different generations process feelings and also how that shows up in how we connect with our audiences, our supporters, and our donors. So let me start with a story. I'm 2 stories about my mom, okay? Now, I was born in 1966. I'm 57 years old, pretty transparent about that. My mom was born in 1927 and my father in 1925. I was a later in life child. That's also a big part of my story. And so I am being raised by the same people who raised the boomers, right? Because all my brothers and sisters are a little bit older than me. They're all of that generation. And when I say boomers, I think it's between like 40, from 46 to 64, 1946 to 1964. I'm going to pull up my cheat sheet just to make sure I get those dates right. Matures are people who are born before 46, just for definition. That would be my parents. Let me get back to my mother. My mom was married in 1946, and soon after, of course, she had a baby, my brother. My brother was, when he was about 8, 9 months old, he contracted spinal meningitis. A very high fever left him with severe physical and cognitive disabilities. Now, this was the late 40s. There was no ADA, there was no speech therapy, there was no physical therapy. It was just my mom, who weighed 100 pounds, soaking wet, carrying around this kid on crutches all day. And she cared for him as long as she could. And then he went into a hospital where he died of a seizure. I think he was about 4. At the time, my mother was 6 months pregnant with my sister. 6 months. She had 6 months to process the death of a child, and the death and just the grief of that. And then my sister was born. There was no grief support. There was no counseling. There was nothing, right? That generation was rooted in survival. My parents were born in the 20s. They went through a depression and they went through a war before they were even 18 years old, right? My dad went to war at 18. So they were survivors and they were hardwired for survival. That is what they did. And if grief or pain happened to you, you swallowed it, right? And you put it aside and you got on with it. You drove down the road and you threw it in a bag and you threw it over the bridge and you never thought about it again. That's how you dealt with pain. That's how you dealt with feelings. You didn't have feelings. Feelings didn't matter. You got on with it. My mother's job was to prepare me for the inevitable disappointment of life. Life is going to be disappointing. I'm going to prepare you that for now. It wasn't about self-actualization or fulfillment. It was about being prepared. If you be ready for the worst crap that can happen, you're going to be fine. Right? This was the generation that kept if you guys know anybody that they always have like shelves of food and another freezer and somewhere in their house. That's just how, but what they knew, right? That was my mom. My mom had a baby 6 months after my brother passed away. I'm going to tell you another story about my mom that I think is super indicative of this generation. Second story. My grandmother was born in 1899. She passed away in 1992. I was in my 20s. I go to the funeral. We're in my grandmother's home and I see this picture and it's my mom and my aunt and this other, young teenager. And I'm like, Mom, who's this? That's you and Aunt Jerry, but who's that? She goes, oh, that was your Aunt Dolores. I was like, who the is Aunt Dolores? Oh, I had a sister. She died when she was like 13 or 14. Maybe actually, I think she was 15 or 16. She had these tumors. She had these tumors that grew in her and then they grew on her brain and she wound up dying. I was in my mid-20s. I had never, ever, ever heard the word Dolores in my life, my whole entire life. And I knew a lot about my mother's family. I knew a lot about my mother's family. I didn't know a lot about my dad's family. My dad grew up an only child. He was very isolated. He didn't talk a lot about his youth, but my mother did. I knew a lot of stories, and that name never ever came up because that's how you process pain. You just don't talk about her. You just shove it down. Now we all know it came out in other ways, which we're not going to get into at this time. That was that generation's how they process pain. They're giving birth to the boomers, right? So the boomers are learning. I'll give you something to cry about, or you go upstairs and get yourself together. And when you're done crying, you come down here. I don't want to see those tears. We learn to stuff down the feelings, like the boomers and I think the older Gen Xers. That's what our parents taught us. Your feelings don't matter, and they are in the way of actually getting stuff done. And you stuff them down. And that worked for a while. But I also think the boomers then became the me generation, right? Because it's like, it was all about self-sacrifice to their parents. So it's like, so then they made it all about them. They made it all about, hey, I'm the me generation. They're the counterculture that, that was the emphasis, was finding self-satisfaction, because their whole life and my whole life was about sacrifice, preparing for ultimate disappointment of life. And I think the Gen X group that I'm in, we adopted that mindset a little bit, of also we spend a lot of time alone. We learn to navigate the world ourselves. We just felt like we couldn't really trust anything around us, so we just had to do it ourselves. Now here come the millennials. The millennials are a big group of people, right? And now they're more focused on feelings. They're more their mental health is now talked about. It's expected. We understand, they spend more time, money, energy understanding how their thoughts and feelings contribute to the everyday decisions that they make. If anybody older than that, me to the boomers, did that, we did that because we wanted to, because we made the choice to do it. There was a lot of unpacking and unlearning I had to do because I wanted to break some patterns that I did not like, and I wanted to break those for my kids. So I made the conscious choice to learn about my feelings. But nobody older than me taught me how to do it. Nobody, because they didn't know, because that's not how they operated. So now we have people younger than me, the millennials, and then the Gen Zs, who are exceptionally good at understanding feelings and navigating feelings. If it doesn't feel right to them, then they're not going to do it. And then we have people who are like, what in the world are you talking about? Just, oh my God. And so you have this disruption, right? You have this conflict. And then if you go down the ladder a little bit to the Gen Z, it's even more because they are even more connected to each other and more connected to their overall mental health. You go from folks who have no feelings to folks who are like, hey, if it doesn't feel right, I'm not going to do it. We went from people who you went to work, and then if you wanted something meaningful in your life, you did it on the side, to now people who want, most of them in the survey, 60% of the Gen Z want their work to make a difference. So we went from no feelings to understanding or to being guided by your feelings, and that being a lead indicator of the choices that you make in your life. So no wonder we're not going to understand each other. And those people who went low contact or no contact, I like, that is your choice. I am not taking that choice away from anyone. I'm just saying, when I look at the generations, I can see, yeah, they don't know how to navigate your feelings because no one ever taught them how to do it. Your feelings can't be meaningful to me till I understand that my feelings are meaningful to, I can't, let me say this again, sorry. I can't honor your feelings until I can honor my own. I didn't know my feelings mattered until I was like in my 40s. um, because no one taught me. And even now I struggle sometimes, right? With like, oh, but it's just a and how do you navigate feelings? Well, they're really good at it. And the Gen Zs are really good at navigating feelings because they do it all the time. So how does this actually play into donating and our donor relationships? So let me just say this. The mature people, they are actually very generous, but they're generous they're generous because of loyalty to an organization. Again, it's about sacrifice, it's about loyalty, it's about creating stability because they were born and raised in very uncertain times, okay? And they tend to donate to emergency relief, the veterans, the arts, advocacy, and politics, right? They represent 26% of national giving, even though they're only 11% of the population right now. The interesting thing is they give out of a sense of loyalty. They don't really need a connection to your nonprofit. They give because they do. My mom used to give to these organizations. I'm like, what are you giving them for? Oh, they mailed me something every month or every year. I just give them some money. That's all they needed. Now we have the boomer generation. The boomer generation is it represents 43% of total giving. That's a big chunk. And they are about to transfer, I think it's like $40 trillion onto the Gen Z and the millennials in the coming years. I think for me and what I see is two things. One is actually three things. One is they are the most driven by emotional appeals, which is interesting if you think about it, because I said they didn't know, they have the least experience in navigating emotions because they didn't have anybody teach them how to do that. And so what happens is when they feel an emotional connection, it means something to them. Whereas somebody younger might feel an emotional connection and be like, oh, that's just a feeling. That's cool. Like, I don't need to act on that. I can just feel that. So they prescribe more significance to having an emotional connection, and emotional appeals are work with them. Second, I think they're inherently the me generation, and they like the ego, they like significance, they like to be thanked, they like to be honored publicly. I think traditionally this is how we see fundraising, and we're really good at this. We know how to put your name in a program or your name on a building. Like, we get how to do that. And I think it's because the boomers wanted that and really appreciated that ego, which makes total sense, giving that they look for, like, how's this going to serve me? How's this going to help me? And also, they are the most likely to want to know more about your finances and go into the gritty details before they donate. Again, that's just their makeup. That says, and that's because they want to be sure they don't really need that much of a relationship, but they do have some skepticism underneath there. All right. As these generations go through, you can see that every generation we're developing this culture of philanthropy deeper and deeper and deeper into our culture. Now, if you come up to the Gen Xers, which is me, that's the people who, between 65, 64, and 76. So I'm on the leading edge of that. That's only a 10-year span, but we're supposed to inherit over 40 trillion, the Gen X and the millennials, over the next 15 or so years. So there's a lot of wealth coming down the pipe for us. We are top supporters of health and human services, animal rights and welfare, and the environment. We present 20% of total giving, so a smaller number, but also we're a smaller group. I think we straddle. I think there's parts of us that like the ego and want that, but there's parts of us that want the connection and community that a millennial does. So I think this group is like kind of navigating both sides, but again, I think we're more towards the millennial side of like, we want connection and community a little bit more than the people older than us do. But now let's go to the millennials. Now this is making so much sense, right? Because the millennials are the bigger group. They're a bigger group of people. They represent a quarter of the population, but only 11% of total giving. So why is this? It's not that they're not charitable. It's that a lot of them are feeling the sandwich. They are taking care of their boomer, or maybe, like late boomer parents, mature parents, and also for children. My siblings went through this. My sister, and there's nothing says sandwich generation like a walker and a car seat in your car at the same time, because she was helping my niece with her kids the same time she was helping take care of my mother. So they feel that, they feel that pressure. They have both of those roles to play. But the most important thing is that most of them, 84% of millennial employees, donated to a nonprofit. So this is a charitable group. So you can see that now, as the philanthropy goes and culture grows and empathy in our society grows, and we understand how important it is to be connected to each other, then philanthropy is coming with it. And so they're top supporters. And I think this is super fascinating, of human rights and international development, child development, and victims of crime and abuse. What I see is every generation before this, they picked easy things to love: veterans, first responders, now we're getting into things that require maybe a little more empathy: victims of crime and abuse, child development, not child welfare homes, but like child development, and human rights and international development, which makes total sense because they grew up in the global village, right? They grew up, that's what we called it in the 80s when the internet started, and they grew up with a global perspective. So it makes perfect sense that they would be more open to international development and international aid, because they feel more connected to the world in general. They really want a sense of community. They want to be a part of something greater than themselves, and they want an emotional connection. They don't want to just give money and be thanked. They want to be a part of a community. And I think for us fundraisers and marketers and nonprofit leaders, creating more and more community is going to be critical, right? My friend Amy Fazio says people come for the cause, they stay for the community. And this is why, because if we want donors, younger donors, we're creating a community. They don't want just the thank you and put my name on the thing and I'm happy. They want to feel something. They want to volunteer. They want opportunities to connect. And that's what's going to drive their giving. They have only just begun to give, right? Their level of giving that they will have. And it's because they have kids, they're sandwiched, all that stuff. But if 84% have donated to a nonprofit, they are prime for giving, and it's just part of their world. Now, the final piece is the Gen Zs. They're born between 1996 and later, which I feel like just happened, but that's okay. But they call them the philanthro kids because they now, each generation, now we have the next level. 30% have already donated to a nonprofit organization. 1 in 10 want to start a charity. And 26% of those have volunteered. Now, here's the most interesting thing for me. 76% of them are worried about the planet. So they see themselves as a global citizen in ways even more powerful than the millennials. And they want meaning in their life. They want their work to make a difference, right? I said before, 60% want their work to make a difference. They're looking to make a difference. Not, I'm going to do my job and then I'll do something meaningful or make a difference on the side. They want their primary purpose is to be making a difference. What is this telling us? The rise in corporate philanthropy, again, because as these people come into the workforce, they're looking for their companies. If they want to, companies want to attract and retain the best people, they're building corporate responsibility, social responsibility. If you went to my donor attraction forum, Kathy Lambert, who talked about corporate partnerships, talked about this. There's a whole renewal energy around corporate giving and corporate philanthropy, and it's driven by, I believe, driven by this group. So if you want to attract these younger donors, this is the time to like really step up and your corporate partnership efforts, because they are expecting this from their employers, and it is changing the landscape as more and more companies are now investing in or looking at their policies for giving back, which had, I think was, I don't have statistics on this, but for me it felt like came up and then dropped off again, but now it's coming back up, but it's due to the demand of their employees that they're relooking at this. So you can see now my 5-generation wingspan from people who gave from a sense of loyalty, which is that's a great reason to give, down to people who give because they are worried about the planet, because they want their lives and their world to make a difference. And you can see the evolution through the generations, and you think, okay, we want to attract younger people, because I hear people tell me this all the time. What do you have that's going to attract them? You can't just say you want them. What do you have that's going to attract them? If they want community, they want connection, they want meaning. And so, and I tell people this all the time, right? You can't make people care about your nonprofit. You can only connect with people. And so it's more important now, because people won't give just out of a sense of duty or loyalty. They're going to give because it's meaningful to them. Even more so than like the boomers or the Gen Xers, they're going to give because you have a specific outcome that they also want to see in their life. And I do feel like that's true across the board. There's a lot of universal truths here. But the younger you get, the more and more important that becomes. So this has been like quite a conversation here. I hope you learned something. And I would love for you to just like take a minute and just like reflect in your own stories in your life of like how you were raised and how you were taught to like manage feelings, how you were taught to see the world, and then how that plays out in your everyday decision making, and how that plays out and how you connect with other people. Yeah, I'll tell you, like everything that I learned either from my sisters, who are pretty smart people, or from that I learned on my own, because I wanted to break some generational patterns and some habits that I had as a kid, that opened me up to different ways of relating. And even when my kids were little and they'd be like, oh, I'm so upset, and my brain would go, oh my God, but my mouth would say, I'm so sorry, what's going on? Because I knew I learned a different way, and I taught them how to honor and process feelings. I work with my son with this every day. He's getting better and better at it. And I just wanted to share that with you, and like share how that experience, our personal experiences that contribute to our everyday life and how we see the world, and as a collective, how we interact with each other and how we interact with nonprofit organizations. And by the way, the stats that I quoted you is from a article in the website classy.org, which does a lot of donor research. And I will put the link in the show notes so you can see all the stats that I was referring to today. All right, that's it for me on this episode of The Influential Nonprofit. If you have, my theme for this year is amplify. So I'm looking for stages. If you're looking for a keynote, I could come talk to you about this stuff. Wouldn't that be cool? For your conference, if you do an AFP conference, if you're part of a national association that does a conference, reach out to me, Maryanne at courageouscommunication.com. courageouscommunication.com. I have a speaker manager, and let's do it. Let's have some fun. And if you haven't yet, you can download, go to the Influential Nonprofit and download your influence starter kit, where you get lots of tips and techniques about how to navigate your feelings, about how to manage yourself and others more effectively. And you can start it there. And I will see you next time on The Influential Nonprofit.